Welcome to Knitting Matters. Welcome indeed to Season 2, Episode 18. Now, thanks so much for taking the time to join me. I really do appreciate it. Whether you're watching for the first time or you've watched all along, I do appreciate you taking the time. So, and if you're not watching live, but you can always watch the replays later, of course. So, I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm an image consultant with my company Style Matters International. And throughout my life, my two passions have been sewing and knitting. And in particular, knitting is the thing that's my therapy. I do it every day and I love it. And I know many of you do as well. I used to also be the proud owner of a yarn store in Brighton, England. And one of the great joys of being the owner of a yarn store is that you get to be able to teach people how to knit and enjoy this wonderful craft. I loved teaching people how to knit then, and I love it even more now, I think, because we can actually reach more people with this new form of technology. So it's wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much. So, and it's so nice to be back after a couple of weeks vacation. I've really missed you, and I kind of hope you missed Knitting Matters too. Now, I also have my camera operator back, and I'm very glad about that because, and I'm sure you are, because now you won't get queasy as I'm wrestling to reposition the camera. So I'm very glad that he's here. I will try and say hello when your names pop up, but I've got an iPad to the left of me, which hopefully I'll be able to see when you do come on. But forgive me if I miss you, because I can only see a certain amount while I'm doing the live. But I do welcome any feedback, and please comment and ask questions, and I will respond as soon as possible afterwards. And I'm just hoping that you can hear me okay. We had a few issues with the sound a bit earlier, so I'm hoping you can hear me. Do let me know if not. Okay, and I'm just looking at my notes here so I don't miss anything important. So today we're going to be talking about mosaic knitting. Now, it's a technique that actually looks more complicated than it really is. And I think we all like those where it's less complicated to do, but it looks really complicated. I think we all like techniques like that. And we're not going to really learn anything that we haven't learned before. We're using techniques and stitches that we've done before, but we're just putting them all together in a different way. So if you can knit, purl and slip stitches and do some colour work, you're already off to the races. And if you can't do those things, I'm going to show you how anyway. So now, if you're a regular to Knitting Matters, you might notice that I'm not in my usual studio in Naples in Florida. This episode is coming to you from downtown Philadelphia, which I'm absolutely loving. It's a historic town, I'm loving it. Now, there is a connection with Philadelphia and the name of mosaic knitting. Does anyone know what that is? While I wait for any answers to come in, while you're pondering that, I'm just going to tell you that the name was coined by Barbara G. Walker. And she is, many of you will know that she's a knitting expert and the author of many knitting books. She's an authority on knitting. She's done a whole range of encyclopedic knitting books. Her treasury collection, of which I have a few, and I'm sure you do too, and some of you I know do, feature many mosaic stitches. And she coined the name mosaic knitting in the 1960s. So does anybody know what the connection is with the name of mosaic knitting and Philadelphia? Any? I'll just ask my camera operative. Any responses? No? Okay. Well, Barbara Walker, who is now 90 years old, she was born in Philadelphia. So you see, you think I throw this all together at the last minute. You see, hours go into this. But no, I thought that was a really interesting little connection there. And so anyway, I am going now to ask the camera to move to the desktop and we will begin. I'm also just going to move this computer out the way, and hopefully I'm just going to sort of refresh my page here. Maybe I can see. Okay, don't know what's going on there. All right, well, you'll tell me if you can't see anything. Now, we've looked at intarsia, two-colour knitting. This is sort of what we're talking about at the moment. We've looked at intarsia and two-colour stranded knitting previously in season 1, episodes 6 and 7, but in some ways mosaic knitting is almost easier for a beginner to try colour work. Now I say this because intarsia or fair isle and you know, or two-stranded knitting, you're working 2 colours in the same row. Sometimes it's more, but generally it's 2 colours in the same row with lots of pattern changes, or colour changes I should say. But you have to twist yarns together for colour changes. You have to do all this sort of thing where you've got to twist. If you're working in tarzi, you've got to twist the yarns together so you don't get a hole. If you're working ferrule or stranded knitting, you're carrying floats at the back of the work, which we don't have here. And sometimes you're doing that both. You're doing both floats and colour changes at the same time with intarsia. But with mosaic knitting, what you're actually doing, the colour changes are between rows. They're actually between rows, and you have slip stitches which kind of pick up from the row below. Now, that's the only addition really that we're doing, but they couldn't be easier. And we did do slip stitch patterns before. It's season 2, episode 2, if you want a refresher, where we did several types of slip stitch patterns. But in mosaic patterns, the slip stitches are created by pulling them up from the row below or from the colour below, but you don't work them. Now, in these examples here, I've got caught up with all my yarns here. So these are 2 examples of a brick stitch pattern that we're going to be looking at and working. Now, I worked the same technique for both of these, but on this one I worked a different depth of brick, if you like. And I will come back to this in a moment because I want to show you something important about this. But let me show you how we do this one. You'll see it's a very nice, it does form like a row of bricks that a bricklayer would have placed, or a stonemason would have worked. That's why it's called the brick pattern, but it's super easy and it's very effective. But let me show you how we do this. Now, you want to, when you cast on, you want to actually have a multiple for this particular pattern. Again, if you're following a proper pattern, if you're following an actual pattern, then do what that says. What I have done here, I've cast on 23 stitches. You want a multiple of 6 minus 1. So in this case, that would be 4 times 6, 24 minus 1. I've got 23. And I've worked a couple of rows so that it stops my edge curling up in garter stitch. And then I've worked 2 setup rows. Basically 1 row in knit and 1 row in purl in my main colour. Now on to row 3, and I'm just going to drop my ball of yarn on the floor. It's easier then. So I'm going to start with my contrast colour here, okay, and I'm not going to knot it. If you find it easier to knot, then do a loose knot, and then you can always unpick it afterwards. I just don't like knots particularly, so I'm just going to make sure. If you find that a bit unwieldy because the yarn becomes loose, then by all means knot it, but do it loosely, and then you can untie it afterwards and weave that in. So I'm going to knit 5. Let me just give that a little tug. And then I'm going to slip the next stitch, and I'm going to slip it purlwise. In this, we're going to always slip purlwise. So if you're following a pattern, it says otherwise, then do what it says. But in this instance, it's going to be slipped purlwise. Okay, we're keeping the yarn at the back. We're not working this stitch. And I'm just going to keep going. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to slip the stitch again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Slip that stitch again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm afraid you're going to have to watch me do the whole row, but I just wanted enough sort of sets of 5 plus the slip stitch so you could see what's going on. Now our next row, I just turn round and I'm going to purl this row. Now we are still slipping the stitch on this purl row. This is where it sometimes differs from other designs. And what you keep your yarn, because this is a purl row and we're doing stockinette stitch essentially. We want to just slip that purlwise, and you keep your yarn where it is. okay? You don't move it backwards or frontwards, you just keep it where it is. So, pearl 5. Oh, I see a few people are coming up. That's so nice. Oh, somebody likes my nail polish. Thank you, Dawn. And Cambridge, Ontario. That's wonderful. Hi, Dawn. Another Dawn. 2 Dawns in a row. How lovely. Oh, I just wasn't paying attention there. I nearly pearled my stitch. So pay attention, Cheryl. I've got to slip this stitch. Again, it's purlwise. I did that the right way on that one. Okay. Slip that again. So I've come to the end of the row. We're not going to worry about that being loose. I'm going to just snug that up. Now we're going to just do 2 rows of knit and purl. So yeah, sorry, you're going to have to watch me do this, but it's important so you see what we do next. So okay, I'm just going to whiz along. This is straightforward knit now. So you don't have to, and you will this time knit the slip stitch. But you can see how the pattern starts to form even just after a few rows here. I'm knitting as fast as I can here. And I know some of you, if you are continental listeners, you'll say, knit continental, Cheryl, it's faster. Well, for me it's not. So I'm knitting the English way or American way, whichever you choose to call that. Why is it your ball of yarn gets stuck when you don't want it to? Now this next row is a purl row, and again we're just going to purl across all stitches, so it's super easy. And you can see here that slip stitch on the back, it sort of leaves a bit of a hole there, which is exactly what it should do, because on the front you've pulled it up from the row below. Nearly there, nearly there. This is where we want to speed it up, but going as fast as I can. Right. So now, there you can see the back. You can see the back, and you can quite clearly see those slipped stitches from the back. So from the front, this is how they look. Okay. Now, and what I would do is I'm just going to carry this yarn up the side. You can do this with stripes anyway and carry it up every couple of rows. You don't have to keep cutting it off. So now what we're going to do the next part of the pattern to make the bricks, and we're going to knit 2, and I'm going to slip the next one purlwise, then I'm going to knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, exactly as we did before. It's just offset now so that we form that pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you would do that along your row until obviously you reach the end, and the same going back exactly as we did before. So this row is purled, slip that purlwise again. When you reach the slip stitch, you're slipping it on both these 2 rows. You're sort of doing a pass, as it were. And we've done, as well as doing slip stitch designs in previous episodes, we've also done it when we've done a bit of double knitting and a bit of brioche where you slip stitches. So you've done the technique before. Right, so that's the first kind of, that's the first 4 rows or 6 rows of the pattern. Okay, and then I would obviously, now I'm going to do 2 more rows, which I will do because I want you to see something. So you can see the tension now. This slip stitch here on these 2 bricks, 3 bricks here, or 4 bricks actually, you can see that's really nice and flat, but you can see how this is pulling up, okay? And I'm going to show you the difference that makes in a second. But as you see me knit this, I want you to see how as soon as those slip stitches are actually knit and dropped, they sort of relax, the tension goes out of them. And you see that's pulled up 2 rows, you see. So as soon as I knit that just relaxes back down. The tension has gone out of it, and it will let the design lay really nice and flat. So you see there, it's pulling up. As soon as I knit it, it sort of goes, and it sits where we want it to be. Again, you can see that's pulling up, which is what we want it to do. Now it's relaxed and the tension has gone out of it. So let me just pull back so you can see, and then I want to show the difference on the second example that I did. Okay. Okay, I'm just purling all the way back now, and I need to do this anyway because the next thing I want to show is another variation on this design, and then I'm already set up to go. Okay, so this brick pattern is just using 2 rows of the contrast colour every time. So you might be thinking, well, I wonder if I can do more rows than that before I drop my slip stitches. So let me show you how nice and flat that is here. So these, you can see those are proper oblongs, as if they were bricks, exactly as our main example was a moment ago. But I did a sample here, which I said I'd come back to, and I want to show you something. So what I did there, instead of just doing 2 rows of light colour, I did 4, and now I have blocked this, so it's, again, as relaxed as it's going to be, or as it's, you know, flat as it's going to be. But you can see they're not quite flat bricks. This row at the top clearly is because I finished that off with a knit row and then a couple of rows of garter stitch. There's no more stitches going to be pulled up from the row below. But you can see these are nice rectangular, but here they're slightly more curved. Now, I still think it's quite pretty, but it's almost more like a sort of little beehive rather than a brick. So it's too much really for that slip stitch, 4 rows. Now, yes, I could do 1 knit row, 1 purl row, 1 knit row, so I would have 3 rows and then start again this side, but then I've got to start my yarn again, and I'm going to have an awful lot of ends this way as well. So what started to be quite a simple, easy pattern then becomes more complicated, and we've got more work to do. However, this one is done with 4 rows, and I think this is particularly nice. I love the texture of this. I don't tend to knit sort of dish cloths and things like that, but I know some people do, and if you do this in cotton, it's a really good one for dishcloths and things. But I love this kind of springy texture. I tend to like sort of what I call squishy knitting, and I love the texture of this. If I hold it like that, perhaps you can just see there's kind of ridges here, and I think that's particularly nice. But this is actually done with 4 rows. We're just doing something slightly different. And I'm going to carry on. I'm going to show you how to do this. I'll use the same knitted sample because it's all set up for it. I've just done my 2 setup rows. So I want you to see this. And this one you have to pay a bit more attention to because you're actually doing purls on knit rows. You're doing exactly the same as we did before, but we're doing sort of purl stitches as well as knit rows. But when we slip those stitches, we need to know where our yarn is. So let me just, okay, let's just move up. I need my white, my light colour yarn now. Now the first row is exactly as it was before. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hang on, I'm twisted here. Okay, it's caught on the edge of my table. That's okay. We're going to slip the next one, knit, 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 5 knits, slip that purlwise, knit, 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 slip one, knit, knit, 4, 5. Okay, so that's exactly the same as we just did down here. Now, as I turn round, what I'm going to do this time, I'm still working with my contrast yarn, but I'm going to knit it. I'm not going to purl it. Now, this is where you just need to pay attention to where your yarn will be when we get to the slip stitch. So I'm going to knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, because my yarn is at the back, if I was to just slip that now, my yarn's going to go across the front, which we don't want. I'll do that deliberately wrong in a minute so you can see the difference. So I've got to bring my yarn forward as if I'm going to purl, because I'm slipping that purlwise. Then I've got to take the yarn back. Knit, 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 knit. I'm going to do this one the wrong way so that you can see the difference. So I'm going to slip that, then keep that, sorry, bring that forward again because I need to purl, okay? So the one in the middle I've done wrong deliberately. So now I mustn't do that. What am I doing? Oh, sorry, I need to go back. See? I need to be knitting that, not purling it. See how easy it is to go wrong? Right, okay, I've knitted up to there. Right, so I slipped that. Let me start again with that. I would have to bring that forward, wrap that right around like that to carry on knitting. What I'm going to do is a deliberate mistake here. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to slip it and carry on knitting. I want you to see what that looks like from the other side. Sorry about that, I got carried away there. So I need to bring that forward, slip that purlwise, wrap that at the back, knit, 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 knit. So it's very easy to do a bit wrong, but it's, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's fixable as long as you find it soon enough. So you can see here, these are still free slip stitches. This one is not, because I didn't move my yarn where I should have done. So let's carry on with the next row. This row now, when we did this down here, was a knit row. It's going to be a purl row now, because we want the nice bobbles. And again, or the purl bumps to make this nice squishy fabric. So again, we've got to take our yarn at the back, we slip our stitch, we've got to bring it forward again because we're purling. And again, for this middle one, I'm going to do it wrong again. So you can see what happens if I don't take my yarn to the back and then bring it forward again. So I'm gaily knitting along, I'm purling along, I'm going to slip that, I'm carrying on purling. And it'll make quite a mess of my design, but I want you to see what happens if it goes wrong. So now I've come up to another slip stitch, which I need to slip it purlwise, bring my yarn. Sorry if you didn't see that, I took the yarn to the back, I slipped that purlwise, I brought the yarn to the front, and I purl. So remember that we're doing a 4 row this time. And I've got one more row to go on that. So that is, remember I'm doing 4 rows here of the light colour. So on this one, on the wrong side row, which normally I would be purling, I'm going to knit because I want my purl bumps in the front. So knit, 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 knit. Got to bring my yarn forward. I need to slip that, bring the yarn back again to the back, as you would when you're knitting rather than purling. I'm going to mess up the one in the middle so you can see the mess. So you can already see that that sort of is a lonely little slip stitch now, and it's kind of, it's not held at the back, it's kind of caught at the front. So anyway, I'm slipping it purlwise. Let's make it, if we're going to make a mess of it, let's make a real mess. It's not unfixable. You could always go in with a crochet hook and just fiddle about with it. I've got a slip stitch here. I need to bring my yarn forward. And when I say forward, it's towards me. I slip the stitch, take the yarn back away from me again. Because remember, I'm knitting this bit. Okay. So now you can see here that my rusty colour yarn it's under tension, but it's not tight. And you can see here, the one that I messed up, you can't see it at all really, in the sense of it's not making that nice sort of brick pattern. I'm just going to do one row of the main colour so you can see again how this relaxes down, but it also scrunches up in a way that we want it to. Now this is just simply a knit and a purl row, and if that's really loose when you start your row, don't pull tight on this one. It's the previous colour you want to pull tight on. That'll help tighten up your stitch nicely. So we're just going to knit along, and now we get to where this whole thing relaxes. But because we've done 4 rows here, and we're doing it with a sort of reverse stocking stitch, if you will. Now this is the messy one. You'll see that the effect we get is slightly more rounded. It's more sort of bunched up, which is exactly what we want. It's as if you're wrapping something and tying it with a ribbon or a piece of string. You get that nice sort of indentation, which is what we want here. But the slip stitch doesn't look stressed. And again, this is just a purl row, exactly the way we did it before. The only difference is, well, one of the only differences is, obviously we've done 4 rows and we've done we've done reverse stocking stitch. But the rows between the bricks, if you will, are still just a knit and purl row. So all that is, you can see quite clearly from the back now, it's a reverse stocking stitch. There's my reverse slip stitch, if you will. So we've done 4 rows in reverse stocking stitch effectively. Let me show you on the front how that starts to form. And then of course we carry on and we do the offset brick. So the next row would be the light colour, and we'd start by knitting 2, we'd slip that, we'd knit 5. So the first row on this is just exactly the same as it was before. You're knitting. The second row on the wrong side, instead of purling across and slipping the stitches, you're still slipping the stitches, but you're knitting because you want your purl bumps to be this side, if you will, or the reverse of your knit stitches to be this side. And you just need to pay attention to where your yarn is when you slip that stitch, so that you're not wrapping the stitch on the incorrect side, as it were. Then row 5, instead of knitting across, you would purl it, slip the stitch as before, and then on that 4th row of the block you would knit on the wrong side, because again you want that reverse stocking stitch. So that's how that comes out. Okay, so that's what happens if you miss your slip stitch. But if really you could, if you discovered it soon enough, you could just drop it down and work it back with a crochet hook. There's not, or with a little needle. You can do that, and we've done an episode where we showed correcting mistakes, and that was one of the things we did if you drop a stitch or you're doing the knits on the pearls or whatever. So you could easily do that. It's not the end of the world. You just want your slip stitch this side. Okay, right, so I hope you found that enjoyable. I'm going to ask the camera to move I'm going to ask for the camera to move back to me. Now, so that was some easy basic mosaic knitting. Now, I hope you found it useful, and next week we're going to do some more mosaic knitting, but we're going to do some slightly more complicated designs. So if you have a penchant, or if you have the inclination to do a bit of practicing, I would try and practice this one with the reverse stocking stitch blocks. By all means, start with the knit, the stockinette stitch version, do start with that just to get the feel of it. But if you're confident with your slip stitching and you're changing the colour, because you're only changing the colour at the end of rows, then do go straight onto this one, because when we do more advanced or more complex mosaic knitting, we're going to be doing knits and purls and that slip stitch. But remember, however complicated the pattern, you're not doing 2 colours in one row. You're only doing 1. So it makes it a lot easier. And it's a good, you get some wonderful designs with mosaic knitting, and we'll be doing 1 or 2 of those next week. So, as always, this episode and all others are uploaded to the page afterwards and to our YouTube channel. This one is season 2, episode 18. And do subscribe to our YouTube channel, where you can see all other videos on the playlist, and of course on Knit Matters. And feel free to ask me questions. I'll get back to them as soon as possible. The Knit Matters page is there for you to ask questions, and I welcome them and any feedback that you may have. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was fun. It's very addictive, this. I know I say that a lot, but it's really fun to do mosaic knitting. And once you get sort of speed up, it really grows quickly. So I hope you find it fun to do. Anyway, I'll stop talking now. I look forward to seeing you for Knit Matters next week. And in between times, stay well, stay safe, and stay knitting. Bye for now.